Just a reminder, there's coffee, breakfast items outside in the hallway. Our next presenter is Bubba Wilson. He's a licensed and certified athletic trainer with over 25 years experience in the secondary, clinical, and outreach arenas of sports medicine. He is currently employed as an outreach athletic trainer for Memorial Hermann Hospital System. Since becoming employed at Memorial Hermann, he has helped to develop, in conjunction with other specialists in the Ironman Sports Medicine Institute Concussion Program, the Concussion Management Program or Protocol, and Return to Play and Return to Learn protocols for public and private schools as required under Texas Health Bill 2038. Mr. Wilson was also instrumental in the development and implementation of the HEAT policy for athletics in Humble ISD. This policy has been adopted and utilized by several other school districts in the greater Houston area. He is a regional director for the Texas State Athletic Trainers Association since 2011 and is on the test writing committee for the athletic training licensure examination through the TDLR. He is past president of the Greater Houston Athletic Trainers Society and in 2014 was inducted into their inaugural Hall of Honor class. Mr. Wilson has also served on several committees for the Southwest Athletic Trainers Association. In 2016, Mr. Wilson was named the District 6 representative for the NATA's Athletic Trainers Care Committee. Please welcome Mr. Bubba Wilson.
All right, thank you very much. Really, all that sounds impressive, but the only person that cares is my mother, and that's so she can sit with her crony friends and go, well, my kid does this, and my kid just got out of prison, and my kid just did this. So really, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So, millennials, I've got a little bit of an off-center sense of humor. This is your trigger warning. I'm going to make fun of people, okay? I'm going to pick on people, and most of it will be on myself, but just in case, you've been warned. And then I'd like to thank Spats for having me down and congratulate them for the work they do for this program. It's phenomenal. If you've never put on a clinic, dealing with the BOC right now over the last couple of years will turn you into an IV drug user in all the things they make you do. So this is a phenomenal time down here, and thank you for having me. All right, so we're going to talk about compliance. I know it's a great Sunday morning at 9 o'clock lecture, isn't it? You know, what we all want to hear. But it's very, very important. This talk could also be known as the AD coming up to you or your coach and saying, hey, we've got to make a trip to Austin. UIL wants to see us. Or, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay? And we're going to get into some of that. The BOC makes us do all these disclosure statements, right? Nobody thinks my opinion's worth enough to pay me for it, therefore I have no financial disclosures. All right? Also, I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV. I did, however, stay at the Holiday Inn Express last night. Okay? It's not going to change how good or bad the talk is. There will be mistakes and inaccuracies in this presentation. I'm going to take full credit unless I can blame someone, and those are the ones that didn't show up this morning for this talk. Okay? It's their fault. Second disclaimer. I'm not here to dictate or set policies and procedures for you guys. It's not my job, okay? I want to start the conversation. And realistically, my ultimate goal when I'm done today is to see you at NATA or at SWATA and have you go, damn it, Bubba, I thought about this crap all the way home. That would be a win for me. I'd be like, yes, I did it, okay? And so I want you to think about it, just at a minimum. Go through there. I've got 3 brain cells, usually 2 are fighting, but I'll think about this a little bit, all right? So I'm not going to insult your intelligence, but we do have to talk about what a policy is, right? We need to define it. My idea of a policy and your idea of a policy are going to be way different sometimes than what Webster says the policy is. So it's a definitive course or method of action selected from among alternatives and in light of given conditions to guide and determine present and future decisions. That pretty much makes sense, right? Also, it's a high-level overall plan that embraces the general goals and acceptable procedures, especially of a governmental body. That involves us right there, does it not? What's a procedure? Series of steps followed in a regular definitive order, a legal procedure, surgical procedure, right? How do we prep a patient in the OR? There's a procedure for that. There's a step-by-step process for that. A traditional or established way of doing things, a protocol, ACL rehab protocol, ankle impingement syndrome protocol. We have a traditional or set way of doing that. Okay? So what's required for compliance? I think that's really the genesis of this talk was people. I'm an outreach athletic trainer for Memorial Hermann. I drive somewhere annually on the basis of 35 to 45,000 miles in that year. Okay? So I always get questions about, hey, do we need this? Does our school district need this? What about this? Can we take a waiver from mommy because the doctor said 2 weeks, but they want them to play? What about that? So that is the genesis of this talk. Okay? So we need to have state and local paperwork, right? We could really change this talk with a few things and go from a high school, public school talk to an NCAA compliance talk. Real easy, could we not? All right, but we got to have state and local paperwork and those requirements. Policies and procedures potentially on one or more of the following. Concussion, yeah, you got to have a concussion management protocol. Emergency action plans required by law. We're going to talk about these in further detail. Maybe you got to have an environmental policy. What's your heat policy or your cold policy? Lightning policy. Skin contagions. How do you handle staph? All right, we're going to talk about these. Again, not to set policy, but to make you cuss me because you're having to think about it. All right, and maybe other considerations we're going to throw in there. So how do we go about becoming compliant? This is pretty important to understand. Who's involved in the process of creating policies and procedures so your school district, your school, and you as an athletic trainer are compliant in all the things that are required? How often do you review your policies and procedures? We're going to touch on that. Some people write it and forget it. That's a problem. What you got to include best practices. I know that's somewhat of a four-letter word, all right? But it's important to have that in there. It's got to be research-based. It can't be, our lightning policy is this because that way my head coach doesn't get pissed at me. Okay? That doesn't work when you have to do this right here. All right, so a lot of this is based on House Bill 2038, which was out in 2011. That's our concussion law. Senate Bill 7 out of 2007, which really deals with, among other things, mostly AED in the schools. Senate Bill 82, also out of 2007, which deals with CPR, emergency action plans, and UIL forms. And TEA code had to go a little further because, you know, the law of unintended consequences, when the legislature gets involved in things, they added in the safety training aspect for the kids and a few other little tweaks. So we got to use the UIL as one of our people, right? We also got to go, if we're a private school, TAPS matters. NCAA matters, not if you're an NCAA school, but actually, amazingly enough, they have some good information. Okay? National Federation of High Schools, NATA. Okay? They have some great information. Consensus statements. Okay? All those things that are out there. American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, NOAA. Okay? Get your weather stuff from them. And the CDC. They have a lot of stuff about concussions. Remember, they put out a lot of concussion stuff probably, I'm going to say in the early 2000s. And also about staff and other things. The CDC has great resources on that. Okay? Also, we got to remember, we got to utilize our administration at our school districts. And that includes your legal department. So you really can't write a policy or a procedure for something and just throw it out there because it may not protect you in the long run. So you got to get legal to bless this thing. And you got to get your school board on. And I'm going to talk about that as far as something goes in a little bit as to why I think the school board's important. Okay, so in my worthless opinion, certain aspects of your policies and procedures have to have some flexibility. Not all of them are going to be rigid. Okay, you've got to have some wiggle room in there. If you read House Bill 2038, everybody goes, well, what about this, what about this? It's got a gray area in there for a reason, okay? You're a licensed and certified athletic trainer. Use your certification and licensure to determine this. Just because I have a headache doesn't mean I have a concussion. Even though I may have been dropped on my head as a kid, it doesn't matter, okay? You must have the ability to adapt based on the environment or a situation that is ever changing, okay? So your emergency action plan may dictate this, but what if it's lightning and we're waiting on the ambulance? Maybe we got to change that for safety reasons, right? So it can't be rigid. And not all aspects of the policy and procedures, though, need to be flexible. Some things are set in stone. We will not deviate, okay? I.e., you're not playing until all your paperwork's in, for an example. And do you need a policy and procedure for everything? And my personal opinion is no. We can have paralysis by analysis. And if we policy and procedure everything, it's going to be about this thick, and we will never be able to comply. Why do you think the NCAA is set up the way it is? They've always got them by the short hairs because there's so many policies, procedures, and rules. You're breaking one by making sure you take care of this one over here. Don't think that's not by design with those guys. All right? So let's look at our state and local requirements. Got to have a medical history, do we not? Okay? Got to have physical. UIL says 7th, 9th, and 11th grade. Unless you answer yes to these certain questions, pretty much everybody's going to answer yes to one of those questions. It ought to be annual in my opinion, but you got to have a physical. Acknowledgement of rules. I was not recruited to come play here. Steroid form, which I think is still laughable that we spent all of those millions of dollars to say, hey, nobody was really taking steroids, or if they were taking the stuff we don't know how to test for, and we're not going to pay for any more testing, but we're still going to throw the form out there. Please. Okay? Sudden cardiac arrest awareness form. I haven't looked at the new one. The original one was a piece of crap. If you looked at it, there were like 9 or 11 cardiac issues that they put on the sheet. If you read it and didn't understand it, you would think all of those could be picked up on EKG. Only 2 could. So I know they've changed it. I haven't looked at it lately to see what the changes are, honestly. Concussion acknowledgement form. So your preseason, you could get a concussion form, right? And then we've got our postseason. What do you do once you get a concussion form that the UIL had to create? The student-athlete safety training that they must go through, right? All of them are supposed to watch the PowerPoint and understand concussion, heat illness, and all those other things. Okay? Coaches have to have their CPR and AED training. But real quick, on the student-athlete safety training, does your district have a mechanism in place to show that all your athletes went through that training? Or do they just say, yeah, we did it, and that should suffice? You better have sign-in sheets or something that shows that they went through this. Okay? So we got our coaches' CPR and AED training. We should have something on file for every coach showing that they have that, should we not? Your coach's rules compliance program, for us old guys, that's known as COPE. All right? That's done. That's a certificate online that they get. And you'll know when it's time to do that. You just walk into any coaching office across the state of Texas and just see this odd alphabet on the board. That's the answers to that rules compliance program. Okay? Your previous athletic participation form, so I've transferred from one school to this school, that whole chain of proof that we've notarized this and we've signed all this and all that crap. The DEC will then say you are or are not eligible to play. They say you're eligible to play. Somebody gripes and the UIL say you're not, and you got to go to Austin. Okay? But you got to have that on file for somebody that transferred before their freshman year. What about your district athletic forms and policies? Okay, maybe your district wants to add 2 more forms that are required. The last school district I worked in, we had a district policies notebook that those parents got and had to read it and acknowledge and sign. So that had to be turned in. So another form that you've got to take. Okay? So question, how do or should you take up your paperwork? In the schools I worked at, I just told them, as far as I was concerned, and we did this through the entire district, give them all to us, the athletic trainer. We're taking the bulk of them anyway. Technically, if you're missing one, you're not eligible to participate, right? So if I don't have acknowledgement of rules, I can't participate. So give us all of them, we'll take them, and then we'll let you know if they're clear or not clear. So we shouldn't just get medical history, physical, maybe steroid and cardiac, but yet the coach has all the other stuff, but he doesn't know where it is because he really never took it. That kid's not eligible to play when that coach does his certification to the district executive committee for varsity football or basketball or whatever. If those kids don't have that, by rule, they're ineligible technically. Okay, so we need all of that. So just do it all at once, in my opinion. All right, who should receive it? So should we get everything? In my opinion, yes. We get it all. We take care of it. It's done. We shouldn't get half. Coach gets half. It shouldn't go to the volunteer at the front desk at the school. Don't put it in my mailbox. Good luck if you slide it under my door. Because it's going to go in a pile over here, and I'm going to claim the janitor swept it up. Even though we didn't let the janitor clean our athletic training room. But good luck with that. One person, one group of people. Our physical form in the last district I was in was a packet. The first page was demographic information, and the rest of it was the instructions on how to turn in a physical, depending on if you were in high school or middle school. If you couldn't follow those instructions, sorry, because what we did as a fail-safe is we wrote them a receipt. So we went through it. If it was all accurate, you get a receipt. Give one copy to the coach of the first sport you're going to. Second copy goes to the most responsible parent in your household. You know what it did? It shut down all those "you lost my child's physical" gripes. Did your child turn it in? He said he did. Where's his receipt? Nobody gave him a receipt. Then you didn't follow instructions. Have a good day. Call my athletic director and complain. Well, did you turn it into the athletic trainer? No. Well, you didn't follow instructions. Have a nice day. Click. Solved them. 12 years in that district, I lost 2. It was a folder. I know exactly what happened. I found one. It was stuck in another. The other one probably was too. But hey, I had a receipt. They had a receipt. Mom, I'm sorry. Fill this out. I'll get you a new physical on my dime, which wasn't. I just take it down to the doctor and say they were cleared. I lost it. I only had to do that once. Okay, but it solves most of the problems. Okay, and then of course they go, oh, well, they'll never tell you sorry after they chewed your ass for 30 minutes, but they will come back in a day or two and go, oh, it was on the magnet on the refrigerator, or it was under the seat of the car, or we found it in the bottom of his backpack, or the dog had it, or whatever it was. So how do we store and secure those papers? Well, do we put it in a filing cabinet, and we can go old school, or do we do it some type of electronic medical records system? Okay, not for me to determine what you should do. That's for your school district to determine how you want to handle it. I've got my own thoughts, all right? And I've got the mic right now, so I could tell them, but, however you want to do it. So who is signing the bottom of the medical history? Are you doing that? You should be, in my opinion, because aren't you the one that's got to know that athlete's medical history, right? History of concussion, cardiac issues, allergies, whatever it is. So you ought to be signing that, right? You ought to know what they need, who your sickle cell kids are. So that needs to be done. And who has or needs access to that paperwork? Basically, you and your coworkers. Occasionally, you need to pull it out so to give coach a phone number, but they don't need access to those records. Okay? And if they've got it, that's fine. That's something for you to deal with. Again, not for me to set policy. Something to cuss me over in a good way, having to think about. And then here's one. We get this all the time. Do our school district records fall under FERPA or HIPAA? The answer is HIPAA. How long you have to keep records under, it's FERPA. How long you have to keep records under FERPA varies than HIPAA. Okay? FERPA is to 21. So you keep them to 22 for that, that way you've got that, or it's 3 years really after they graduate to 21. So keep them to 22 and you've got it. HIPAA falls under the physician's office. So that physician note that clears little Johnny to play has got to be on file with that physician for 7 years. You've only got to keep it basically to the age of 21. But don't take that from me, even though I stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night, okay? Talk to your school district personnel and y'all decide how you want to do it. What about your coaches? I know that's a 4-letter word right there. Smart coach is an oxymoron in most cases, all right? Do they know the rule changes for the current season? Okay? If you take Little League Baseball, there was a study out there just in Little League Baseball, and I'll throw it out there, that they have pitch counts, right? 50% of Little League Baseball coaches don't know the pitch counts for their own teams they're coaching. Do your coaches know the rule changes that have been put into effect for the upcoming season in their sport? Maybe it's in football and how we're going to tackle or how we do this. They should know those, right? And they typically get told that at their regional coaching clinic or at coach's school, but usually they're out at the topless place and they don't remember that, all right? What about your participation regulations? Do they know those? What about your preseason summer practice guidelines? They should know those, right? Keyword is should. What about tackling or other coaching techniques? In this day and age, you better have tackling techniques. You better know what the latest and greatest is. You don't necessarily have to be implementing it right away. But if you're just going and saying, get his ass on the ground versus head up, blah, 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 you're going to find yourself in trouble. They've got to have their CPR AED training. Remember, okay, so in 2007 it became law. Really, it came out early 2000s where they had to get it originally, and they were all upset and crying, we got to do this. That's why we have you. I'm not on your bus coming back from somewhere from a late night basketball game in January. I was at home covering home events. Oh, I never thought about that. Do you love your own children? Yeah. Learn to save their life. Okay, so that'll shut them up fairly quickly for most of them. And remember, your coaches are required to get their concussion education 2 hours for every 2-year cycle. Okay, I don't care how you do it. You can give them 2 hours every year. You can give them 2 hours every other year. Give them an hour every year. Doesn't matter. Make sure they've got to make sure they've got it and they can show proof. So how does your district want to handle that? All right. What about concussions? Concussion oversight team. You must have one. Okay. House Bill 2038 says that team must be board approved. Okay. Who's your boss? Okay, so who here, show of hands, and you're not going to be in trouble, but show of hands, who here has an athletic director that is also a head coach of a sport and you fall under their purview? Anybody? Y'all are not in compliance if they're your boss. You're not in compliance under House Bill 2038. One of the best things that law did is Section 38.157 4C underneath that. Find it and read it. If they are a coach, they cannot be your boss. So think about it. I hold out my it's the women's basketball coach and they're the AD. I hold out their starting point guard for a concussion or anything, injury of any kind, and we lose the second round playoff game because of it, and they're going to ding me on my evaluation. Can't happen. Okay? Cannot happen by law. So look at that and think about it. Y'all are not in the minority, by the way, of having a coach be your boss. There's a lot of school districts that aren't compliant there. I'm waiting for the first lawsuit. It'll come out eventually. Don't call me as a witness, please. Okay? You got to have a concussion management protocol, right? It's got to be approved by your concussion oversight team. They've got to basically write it. Now, here's my question. My question is this. Your concussion oversight team has to be board approved. Why doesn't your concussion management protocol have to be board approved? Why isn't it? I'm going to argue it should be. If we board approve the document, now everybody's held to the same standard. Okay? If we violate board policy, we can be fired. Somebody can be fired with cause. You violated board policy, you can be fired. So the squeaky wheel cannot get the grease. Mama's griping over here that their son can't participate because of a concussion, and they don't think that's right. Your principal, AD, or soup can't nudge in and go, look, just grease the wheels and get this taken care of. No. I'm going to follow the law, but I'm also having to follow board policy. And for most everybody, we know law is bigger than policy, but policy is what's going to get you fired before the law ever takes effect, right? So make it a board policy, in my opinion. So how is your concussion management protocol? How many in here have more than one high school in their district? Okay, quite a few of you. That concussion management protocol can only be one protocol for all those schools. It cannot be a protocol for school A and a different protocol for school B. By law, it's got to be district concussion management protocol. Okay? So if you have that, don't raise your hand, but you're not in compliance. Okay? My personal opinion is it can be, by law, but it should be different for the high schools versus the middle schools. Now, if your middle school has full-time athletic trainers or maybe has somebody that can go to 1 or 2 in a day, you could have the same protocol. But I'm not going to leave the high school during any season to go to the middle school to go administer a return-to-play progression on a middle school kid and then try to come back and do my job over here at the high school. So it can be different. You're not going to get in trouble if that's different. You would get in trouble if it was different for each high school. Okay? It's got to be the same for each sport too, people. Well, we're going to go varsity football. Our return to play will be 3 days, and everybody else will be 10. Not going to work. Okay? So standard number of days across each sport, across each team, across each position. Okay? Swimming's a different animal. I get it, but keep it consistent. Okay? I'd rather have the coach griping, well, it's only tennis. Yeah, but it's only a concussion too, right? We're going to be consistent across the board. Okay? Now, you need to use peer-reviewed information for that return-to-play protocol. That's in the law. So it can't be, we're going to do something that all my coaches agree with that makes them happy, We're going to do with what the standard, the evidence, the best practices show is how we need to do this. Okay? And how many have a return to learn protocol? That's the new thing. Texas is behind the times. A lot of states are creating that in the legislature. That scares me because anything the legislature gets involved in usually gets screwed up somewhere. Okay? But that needs to be the next step in making sure that your athletes are getting taken care of from a injury of a concussion and making sure they're all right. Emergency action plan we got to have by law. We talked about that, right? Do we have one for each athletic site? It's got to be venue specific. Are we drilling it each year? I know a lot of places don't. Their idea of drilling it goes, oh, yeah, okay, file that away. Okay, but you got to drill it. We drilled it each year in Humble ISD. Now, Humble, let me give them some props. For all the problems that every school district has, we didn't have issues with following the law and coaches having paperwork in because our AD would fire them, okay? And did. And so they knew it was going to happen. You get fired for running up the score on the opponent in our school district. Fired a freshman B-team basketball coach for that exact reason when you are full court pressing up 50 in the second half. You're told to stop, and you didn't, you won't be back next year. Have a good day, okay? But it must be drilled each year. So we've got to do that. When our sports drilled their emergency action plan, they would call me and the campus coordinator and say, we're drilling today in fifth period, just for instance. So we would put an old knee brace up on the AED cabinet outside the athletic training room door because I didn't want them to take the real one and then drop it and break it because we know how quickly we get anything replaced in public schools, right? Next year, at best. And then they would have to turn in a sheet to us saying who did what at each specific thing for that emergency action plan, including how long did it take that AED to get there. Okay? I kept one on file, the coordinator kept one on file, and it went up to the AD. So we had a paper trail. Your EAP, is it posted in each venue? And there's an asterisk beside that. So by law, you got to have one. It's got to be venue specific, and you've got to drill it. But why doesn't it have to be posted? Okay? And my argument is this. I'm hosting a playoff game in soccer, that god-awful sport, all right, between two neutral teams, and I don't have to work. If it's not posted, how many think that whoever your administrator on duty is that night for that game knows the address of that school, the cross streets, and how to tell them where to potentially go, because EMS usually gets it wrong and where I'm at, where to go to get into that venue? So why isn't it posted so I can have an assistant coach or a student on the phone with EMS, depending on how you have to break it down, on the phone with EMS while somebody's rendering aid to that kid? It needs to be posted in your dugouts, on your sideline, in your gyms, in the locker room. I don't care. You know, put it on the marquee sign and whatever you want to do. But in my opinion, it ought to be posted. Okay, and what publications and documents are you using to develop your emergency action plan? Again, we don't write one that makes our AD or our coaches happy. We write one that's going to protect our kids and give them the best care possible. What about equipment removal? Okay, Mike stood up here and gave a great presentation that made you think about a few things on Friday. Okay, but what about equipment removal? I don't care what you do. That's your call. Okay, standard says this, but there's times you got to deviate. But I'm not going to get on that soapbox. Okay, but remember, it's when able. They changed that within that posting to say when able. AEDs. Are you doing your weekly checks? I know a lot of heads dropping. Make sure you document those. What about your monthly checks? Okay, weekly check, is it green or red? Is there a check or an X? Monthly check, you need to be turning it on, making sure it's working, right? Because it could say everything's good and the thing doesn't want to work. How long does it take to retrieve the AED? By law, what's the number? How many minutes? 3. 3 minutes by law. That's in one of those laws I referenced at the start. This could have been an EBP talk. All right. So how long does it take to get there? Okay. Now, it's for the school to determine where they're going to put them, but if it's locked up in the nurse's office after 3 o'clock and you don't have a key, I solemnly swear to tell the truth, yes, sir, it wasn't there. Okay. Now, in certain districts, all the athletic trainers have one. I like that idea. Wherever I go, it goes. If I go to practice, it goes to practice. If I go to a game, it goes to a game. If I go to the playoffs, it goes to the playoffs. The site should have one. Keyword should. So they're cheap, let us have one. What's the plan if you use one? Okay? Who's coming to download the data off of it? Are you getting new pads and new batteries? Or are they just going to give you a new one? You really should also, and I don't have it on here, you really should also have a chain of custody form for that AED once it's used. So I use it, so-and-so is going to come pick it up and download the data. They need to sign that they've taken the AED out of my possession. Okay? I watch enough Law and Order and stuff to know that needs to be done. But they need to show that that was happening. It's CYA, okay? Environmental concerns. When I came out of school in 1990, lightning, what's that? Okay? Heat, yeah, it's hot in Texas. It's a different world now. Heat, humidity, and acclimatization, right? So we have lightning, ozone, cold. Who makes the call on these, right? And what are we using to document these, create these policies and procedures? We're just going to touch on a few of them. So we look at heat and humidity. What instrument are we using to get our heat info? Okay, are we using heat index, or are we using the wet bulb number to create our policies? Okay, what are our cutoffs for those? And how did we come about those as our cutoffs? If we say our cutoffs are just so our coach won't complain, we got problems. The one I helped create in Humble ISD, we took from August 1st through the month of October, we took data for an entire, every day, 5 days a week, and even if we practice on Saturday, we took data for that period, looked at data through NOAA for averages, and then created our policy off of that for the next year. Okay? So we didn't just say, oh, this, and we'll do this. We looked at it to see what we were getting. What's our criteria to modify practice or suspend practice? And are our sports following the UIL rules on acclimatization? They should be. They better be. If I move in week 2 of football season from somewhere, I better not go straight into pads. Okay? What about lightning? A couple of things on this. Get your pen ready. So how we get in our lightning strike information? Back in the day, it was Skyskin, right? You wanted to go in early, start the gator or start the golf cart. That sucker would light up. Coach, we got to go. Okay? One of my early jobs, I had the pleasure, or depending on the day, the misfortune of working for Emory Ballard. So if you don't know who he is, he invented the wishbone offense. But he was blind in one eye. And I'm not kidding you. Lightning always struck on his blind side. I didn't see anything. And then he'd be like, where's everybody at? Coach, the varsity's the only one out here. Everybody else went inside an hour ago. I've been telling you it's bad. And finally we would go inside. But where are we getting our lightning strike information from? What's your unsafe distance? Okay. What's your all clear criteria? And it says in here, your school district versus your opponent. All right? So let's just say most people, the standard is 6 miles. That's slowly creeping up to 8 for a lot of people. But let's say my school district says 6 miles, we must go in. And outside of 6 miles, depending on what we're using, we could go back out. I know some school districts that it's 10. So what if we're playing each other and they're at my place? Our criteria is 6. Theirs is 10. You know what? You can't punish them. You can't punish them for going in at 10 or not coming out until it's outside of 10 miles. That's their safe number. That's them protecting their athletes. Okay? So something to think about. If you look at that same thing, so if we just go old school flash to bang, which it's cheap, it doesn't cost anything, except for a pair of good eyes and some ears. Okay? Flash to bang in Houston, Texas is a lot different than Midland, Texas. Okay? If you see it, you can't go out. Well, hell, it could be 100 miles out in Midland, Texas. Okay? So we can't necessarily use that as our criteria. Hondo, you never play, would you? You'd start lightning and you'd never go back. All right? So we've got to look at how we're getting that data. What about your safe shelter? Okay? What if you're at a baseball game and you don't have locker rooms in a big area to put the fans? You better expand your unsafe distance to give you a little bit of a cushion to get everybody to their cars and to the buses. All right? So again, something to think about. What about your public notification? How are you notifying the fans, get out of the stands? To me, write a script, post it every outdoor venue where the PA announcer is. Now it's the same thing we're going to say across the board. It's unsafe, blah, 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 blah. Get out of the stands. We're not responsible for it. Okay? And what publications and sites are we using to set up that policy? Okay, again, we need to have some science associated with why we did what we did, why we wrote what we wrote. Okay, what about you as the athletic trainer? Are you adhering to professional standards, i.e., did you just be a drive-by CEU guy this weekend, pick up your packet and leave? If you did, you're not in this room, right? So you're adhering to professional standards. Are you meeting all your CEU requirements and also your 2 hours of concussion education that we as athletic trainers are required to have? You've got to be able to show that. It technically should be on a separate certificate. What about your professional rescuer or your American Heart Association equivalent for your CPR? It's no longer layperson, it's got to be professional rescuer. Okay, can we produce the documentation for our CEUs? Remember, you got to have 40 for a licensed athletic trainer, 50 for BOC, with 10 of those being those 3 letters that nobody likes right now, EBP. Okay, can you produce that documentation? You need to be able to. And you have to keep it for 2 years for BOC after your reporting period. So our reporting period ends December 31st of 17. I've got to keep it through 19 before I can get rid of it, because they may come back and audit you. You just can't say I'm done and toss it. Are you in good standing? Your license is up to date. You've paid any fees, all those things. And do you have standing orders or delegation of authority? If you don't, good luck to you. Okay? Because now you have nobody, no one, and no proof that I can take that ankle sprain that I'm looking at and treat without having to send them to the doctor first. So you better have those. And are your modalities safety checked and calibrated? And are they current? Okay? If your school district won't pay to get that done, or they said they were going to do it, but we got to wait, you better lock those up and not use them until they get to be safety checked and calibrated. Because all you need is one kid to have a problem on a machine that's out of date by 3-4 years. You can't win that argument. Do you document treatments, injuries, and all of that? How do you do it? What do you document? Bubba came in. Well, Bubba came in for treatment for his right ankle on, what is today, the 18th? June 18th, right ankle at this rough time. We did these things. Or Bubba came in. How do you do it? How much are you documenting? Okay? We did X, Y, and Z with Bubba when he was in here, and that's written down somewhere. Or, we did something. He was here. We did something. Okay? How are we storing those documents? Again, is it filing cabinet or electronic medical record? Is it paper versus the, whatever the technology land is called these days, cloud or whatever? Okay? Filing cabinet or EMR program. Are we a paper people, or are we putting everything in an EMR system and having a program for that? There's some good ones out there. They're not that expensive. Public records request. This spring in Houston, Texas, if you were a 3A to 6A high school in the greater Houston area, Channel 11 sent a records request to all of them looking for 4 years' worth of data for middle school and high school injuries and treatments. Perfectly legal to do. Okay? I can't tell you the number of phone calls I got saying, can they do that? Yes, they can. You must now, unless your district tells you otherwise, first your district should tell you to provide it. Your higher up should then tell you who to give it to, because really your legal needs to go through and make sure there's no identifying information on there, okay? But you just can't not do it because you don't agree with that. Your district can tell them we're not going to do it for whatever reason, and you're covered, but get it in writing. So they hammered all the schools, and then if those schools didn't turn it in, they've come back and asked for it again, and then they set a date. So it needed to be into them by this date. Well, they didn't realize what they were getting. I know one school that sent them over 1,000 pages, and they charged them for it. So good for them, okay? They got inundated with data. So those remaining schools that hadn't turned anything in, they finally came back and said, all we want is heat illness and concussion data, because they didn't know what to do with everything else. But it lends a question about how you handle your documentation. You better be doing it. And at the same time, if you don't have an electronic record-keeping process, why not? They're cheap. Get one. All right, it's $1,000 max to get onto one the first time, a couple $100 a year after that for maintenance. All right, school districts will spend $300,000 a year tweaking their attendance software. If you give them an option to pay for something that you can show them, they'll probably buy it for you, especially after this. So in politics, never let a good crisis go to waste. Never let a good public information request go to waste. Get you an electronic medical record system, okay? So we could stop right there, guys. We could be done, over, finished. No, okay? Ozone. How are we getting our information? Location matters. Humboldt High School is right over the landing pattern for Intercontinental Airport. You think their weather pattern, their ozone is different than 8 miles away at Kingwood High School? Yes, it is. You think Kingwood High School's weather ozone is different than Deer Park, right in the middle of all the refineries and chemical plants? Yes, it is. Do you think LaPorte High School's ozone is different than Bryan ISD's? Yes, it is. Okay, so location matters. So where are we getting our information from? And if we're just using the one that Channel 11's given us, it's not accurate for where we're at right now. Why does ozone matter? Our asthmatics. What's our criteria to modify or suspend? We got to have one. How are we notifying people? Well, it was a bad ozone day. Well, that doesn't mean anything. We modify practice. Well, who made that call? And how did we let coaches know? Okay. What about the cold? We're athletes. We should be out there. I hate being cold. Okay. How are we getting our information? Do we have something set up on our campus that's giving it to us, or maybe something on another campus that's part of a weather system that we can get that data from 3 blocks away? That didn't change a lot that's going to matter. Area state makes a difference, right? 40 degrees in Houston is different than 40 degrees in Odessa, Texas. 40 degrees in Odessa, Texas versus 40 degrees on South Padre Island. Down here, they're lighting themselves on fire, okay? And nobody's getting out. 40 degrees in Odessa, they're in shorts and tank tops. In Houston, Texas, with the humidity, it's bone-chilling cold, it's miserable, okay? But area of the state matters. So my cold policy, if I write one in Houston, Texas, is not going to be the same cold policy that you're going to write in South Padre, okay? So you can't steal mine if I have one. You can use some of the verbiage, but you got to look at your own numbers. What's your criteria to modify or suspend? All right, skin contagions, staph, other skin lesions, okay? We're just going to go through this. So what about staph? You got to have physician clearance, right? And remember, we know it's not a spider bite, but they don't. Okay? Got to have physician clearance. Can't be draining. It's got to be covered. No sharing. Good luck with that one. Okay? Medicines, they should be on an antibiotic, right? They should be on the appropriate antibiotic. We can't control that, but hopefully that's getting taken care of. What about cleaning and disinfecting? Not just at the school, but what is mom and dad doing at home? When's the last time they washed their towels? When's the last time they washed or changed their sheets? I've seen some of their cars. They ought to go through and disinfect those things. Okay? We, in the school setting, can only do so much. There's stuff that's got to happen at home. Right? What about ringworm? Do we need a policy for that, or all skin contagions? Warts? Abrasions? Lacerations? Sutures? Rashes? Okay? We could policy and procedure ourselves to death, right? But I'm just going to throw them all out there. What about other medical conditions? What about asthma? That's a big one. We should have a policy, procedure, a standard, whatever you want to call it. We should have something about that. What about diabetes? What about sickle cell trait? Good talk on that earlier, right? What about rhabdo? Allergies. And not just I got the sniffles, but bees and all that. General illness. Okay, let's look at asthma, though. So are your athletes allowed to carry their metered dose inhaler? They should be. If they don't have it because it's going to be in the nurse's office, when they get that asthma attack, can they get it from the nurse's office and back before there's something bad that happens? Let them carry their freaking inhaler. All right? What if they forget it? What do we do? What do we do for practice if they forget it? Now, we know what's going to happen. I forgot my inhaler and I need one. There'll be 7 getting thrown at them of all different varieties. Okay? But that's not the best practice for the care of asthma, is it? Okay? What about a game? Home versus away. Varsity versus sub-varsity. Okay? Should Johnny be able to play football on an away road game if he's asthmatic and doesn't have his inhaler? Hell no. Okay? When Mama comes and brings him one, Johnny can play. But I wouldn't let him play. And how are you going to handle making sure they have them? All to think about, not for me to set. Okay? What about the kid, and we've all had this, when they check that they're asthmatic on their medical history, but they don't have an inhaler. Oh, the doctor didn't give me one. He says I'm outgrowing it. Yeah, right. You're not asthmatic. Okay? What about diabetes? Do you have a glucose meter? I'm going to tell you, you ought to have one whether you have diabetics or not, because at some point you're going to get one. Glucose meters are cheap. $20. You can get a vial of 50 test strips. It lasts you over a year if you get them at a good time. Some of them, you can buy, and if you buy like a generic brand of a different grocery store, they're even cheaper than that. Do you know normal blood glucose ranges? What's considered high? What's considered low? I don't care about the high for a one moment in time. You're high for days or weeks at a time, problem. One low is bad. One low is life-threatening. Okay? And there's relative levels of low, but do you need to know those ranges? Are they type 1 versus type 2? That kind of matters, but it doesn't. The low blood sugar care is the same, hypoglycemia-wise, between the two differences. It matters in a couple other areas if they're type 1 and type 2. Okay? Do you have glucose or something sugar-wise in case they go low? And there's some kids, even some hypoglycemics that aren't diabetic, that have to have glucagon. So it's an injection, like your EpiPen. Okay, what about snacks? We always had snacks. I'm a diabetic. So I always had snacks. Oh, God, I wish I could get a low blood sugar episode. But anyway, I always had snacks, and we kept snacks and Powerade, Gatorade, whatever the contract was of the week. Cokes, we had that for that quick sugar, okay? If they play sports and they're in a pump, they wear a pump, so it looks like a pager. It's got a tube that looks like this microphone cord that goes into an infusion port somewhere on their body, usually abdomen, legs, buttocks. They can't play in that pump unless they're a golfer, okay? So they've got to take that off, and we need to protect that port site by covering it with something, okay? But they know that. You just got to remind them because that pump's about $10,000 to replace. What about sickle cell trait? It should be noted on their medical history, keyword should, right? I'm a parent. My daughter was tested. She doesn't have it, but at the same time, I also remember just going 2 eyes, 2 ears, normal face. She doesn't look like me. That's good. 10 fingers, 10 toes. I don't listen to much else of what the doctors tell me at that point, okay? But they should know it. Keyword should, again. Are you testing for it? I know some school districts that do test for it when they do their annual physicals. They do mass physicals, they test for it. They're buying the kits, they're cheap. Health occupation students are coming in and doing that. But they should all know. Remember our early season exertion, okay? Our outdoor workouts, which then goes back into what's your heat policy. So, what rhabdo, the big one. Do we know those again with sickle cell trait? Do we know signs and symptoms of rhabdo? What's the treatment of it? Besides 911, right? Do we have oxygen available? There's a lot of issues with being able to administer oxygen because you got to have a prescription, you got to have the stuff. All right, I got 2 sickle cell kids, I'm treating one with oxygen because maybe rhabdo, and the other one goes. There's some issues with being able to use that same oxygen on a different kid. So not my thing to tell you how to do that. It's your thing, again, to talk to the people within your school district and look at that. Allergies. Bee and wasp stings, ants, nut allergies, other allergies. I'm allergic to air, I'm allergic to grass, whatever it is. Do they have an EpiPen? They should, if they're bad enough. Who provides that EpiPen? Does your school district buy one for you guys to have? Or does the student have one? If you want to know why EpiPens got so expensive, if you go back to it, there was a push to have school districts buy those and have them available. All right? And again, if you use an EpiPen, you must call 911. We could stop right there, guys, and I swear I'm almost done. You're sick of hearing me drone. But we could be done right there, but we're not. Okay? Other things to think about. What about colds, fever, return to play from mono? So for fever, what's your magic number on temperature that they don't work out? What about return to play from an orthopedic injury? How do we handle doctor shopping for injuries? What does your school district say about doctor shopping? They allow it, and finally they'll just say, okay, the one that says yes wins? Or what's your policy? Do you let the ER clear an athlete? My opinion is you shouldn't. That's not their job, right? Their job is to triage. Are you okay enough to go home? Do we need to consult, or do you need to be admitted? Or, figure it out. Go to your primary care or specialist after that. Well, how do we handle an athlete that was cleared during physical or failed a physical and needs to get cleared? They got failed for a potential heart murmur, and you're doing it at school, and they go to their primary care, and their primary care passes them. Well, your school district allow that to clear them. Something to think about. And these conversations need to be had well in advance, not when, occasionally you're going to have we've never had this when a meteor falls out of the sky or something, but you should have something that says, oh, hang on, we can't do that I need to push it up to so-and-so, whatever your policy and procedure or however you want to look at it is. And what about mommy notes? Do you accept them? Some places do, some places don't. We gave them one as a freshman. You're now in high school, son. You get one mommy note for one day. After that, you come to us or you go to the doctor and bring a different note. Okay? Is there or should there be more? What about other conditions? What about other situations? And again, this is why I say I don't believe you should have a policy and procedure for everything. That list is now growing to what? About 3.5, 4 feet tall if we policy and procedure everything. And again, we'll never remember all the rules. And the answer is, though, yes, there's more. What should we do with it? Okay? What about over-the-counter medications? Do you give them out? Do you have permission to give them out? Do you document that you give them out, or are you just handing it out like candy? How many times can kid A come in and complain they've got a headache before you're going to tell them you need to go to the doctor? Right? Okay? What about prescription meds? That's pretty much is an easy one in my opinion. However, the high school where my daughter went, that nurse, we'll just say she wasn't pleasant. So we had to circumvent because of some stuff my daughter was involved in because she wanted it in her office. But again, after 3 o'clock, where is she? What about bloodborne pathogens? What about your athletic training room policies? Okay, so more things to think about. Okay, so just one last thing and I'm done. Anybody know who that is? Old guys do. Old. So, do you have a compliance checklist? So when do we know all of our different policies and procedures? There ought to be a list somewhere that you can look at and know what you've got. When's the last time they were reviewed? Okay, you can't set it and forget it. It's not the Ronco whatever. All right? You have to, my opinion is, make it every year that there's a legislative session. It's easy. So if a new law comes into effect, we're ready to go. Or if a law gets tweaked, even though lawmakers write perfect laws, just ask them, they'll tell you. Okay? If it gets tweaked, you're ready to review your documents, and you can make changes as needed. Okay? So when we're scheduled for review, let's do it then. Do we have a list of all required paperwork, not just of our policies and procedures? Do our coaches know everything a kid must have to be able to participate? And I'm not going to single out one company, but they were here, rank 1. You can put all those things in individually. Coach, they ain't got this, and that's required. Okay? Now, that's also got to come from the top where your AD says they better turn it all in. Okay? And again, I haven't had that problem. Okay? That's it, guys. Questions, comments, concerns, arguments? There's a lot of them been there over 10 years that don't have a clue about Natasha's law. Guys, how is all this stuff written? When you look at the laws, what does it say? Superintendent or superintendent's designee, which means the superintendent sees it and pawns it off on somebody else. Okay? Half the time they don't know what the law says because they've pawned it off and they don't even know if they're compliant in it. But that's another talk for another time. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, again, part of my argument as to why that concussion management protocol needs to be board approved. You know they're athletes, right? Just ask them. So, but, yeah. Anything else?
We had another question. Would the return to learn policy have to apply to all students who sustain a concussion, athletics, and general population?
My loose answer is sure, it should. Okay? We are special in athletics. However, a concussion is a concussion, right? It doesn't discriminate between an athlete versus an academic. And there are athletes that are academics. Don't even start there. Okay? But to my opinion, that ought to be for everybody. Okay? But the law itself is talking about athletics and all that, the extracurricular. So that, again, that's for a school district to decide how they want to do that. I'm not the attorney, okay? I'm not going to say it, you must do this. My quick response to that is, and the work we've done on it, it ought to be across the board, because if that kid's a general student and sees somebody, They may need academic modifications. The real deal with the return to learn is ensuring that these academic modifications are being met by the teachers. And that, in my opinion, that's not the athletic trainer's job to ensure. I don't want the classroom teacher in my athletic training room, they don't want me in their classroom. And I don't really want to go into their classroom and say, hey, Johnny's got a concussion and he can't take a test. Why are you making him take a test? That's for mama and the administration to deal with.
Good morning. I had a question on, yesterday we were talking about the heat-related illness, and we were talking about taking rectal temperatures. Now, I don't know about you, but
I know where you're going.
you know, yeah, you know where I'm going, definitely. But you know, what do you do? I mean, do you have like another parent permission to perform this invasive procedure in case of an emergency, or because you're not going to be doing it just for let's see if it works,
Okay, so I'm going to give you two answers that neither of them are wrong and neither of them are right.
I understand.
What's the best practice?
Do what's
What's
right
the
for
standard of
student.
care?
What's the standard of care?
Okay, but at the same time, your school district has a legal representative that they hired to work on their behalf, right?
Yes, sir.
What does that district legal department say? You've got to go from there.
Gotta
Because
go from
ultimately,
there.
who do you work for? You work for the school district.
Work for the school district.
Who's going to represent you and pay for your attorney if something goes on?
That's questionable.
Okay, that's another question that ought to be asked. So I'm not going to tell you, because I have my own thoughts on how to handle that, but my own thoughts on where I work now might not work at your school district.
Well,
So
how
you've
does
got
it
to-
work for you? Like for example, I guess that's why I'm asking this question. How would you handle that?
How I would handle it would have that conversation ahead of time with my school district administration and legal to say, here's the best standard for how we ought to do this, and here's the reason we need to do that. You with the JD behind your name, what say you, and how are we going to handle this? And then if we don't do it, what are my protections? And if we do this, what are my protections?
Okay. And then you also mentioned doing the diabetic test. Are there any stipulations or regulatory requirements for obtaining such equipment and using it?
No, it is a non-prescription tool.
Along-
Test strips can be bought over the counter. The machine can be bought over the counter. You've got a diabetic, or you got they're used to getting their fingers pricked all the time to check their blood sugar. No big deal.
Okay, and then the medication part, if I recall, there's forms that, for children who have issues other than, athletic type situations that they can take medication at school.
Right.
Can you use that same form for the after-hour medication
Why not?
dispensing?
Then you're part of school, right?
Yep.
Why not? It might be the same one. You may just
Yeah.
need to get a copy if you want to have a copy. But I don't understand, and it happens. I don't understand why Sally can take her medicine at lunch, but we
not
can't
after
have it
hours.
available after school.
After hours, right.
You
Even
know.
if you have the right dosage, if you're given the correct dosage, and you could package it or something.
I mean, a lot of ways to work around that. Again, I just want you to cuss me because you're thinking about this all the way home.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much.
Anyone have any more questions?
Thank you.